Welcome to Decide to Transform. You made it to level 2, deeper questions leading to deeper answers. I'm Tomas Garza, and I'm here to help you decide to transform. I'll be setting the pace for the process to support your unfolding. Learn and commit to a practice that brings simplicity and awareness of what is ready to be released. Join me now and allow the experience of a deeper sense of love.
Welcome everyone to Decide to Transform. I am your host, Tomas Garza. You are listening to OMTimes Radio here today, and I want to welcome you wherever you are in the world. And I want to give a shout out to all of you who have written in over the past week with questions and with kind words to me. I really very much appreciate it, and it means so much to me that this show is impacting people all over the world. That's one of the reasons why I began podcasting in the first place, was to take my experience, to take a message and broadcast it to the entire world, including very much to people that I've never met, in other countries that I've never been to. And who knows, life is long, but I may never meet most of you that have written in. So thank you so much for that. Your words mean so much to me, and I very much appreciate that. And it's with that same spirit of gratitude and reaching out and service that I want to preface today's show. Today's show is going to be the last in what's been a 4-part mini-series of deep personal exposés for me, where I've been encouraged at first by my wife Cindy and then by other people to go deep and really share some of the dramatic, some of the harmful, the hurtful, and the personal stories that have helped bring me to where I am today. And I think that it's a very important thing for a radio show host to do, or anyone that is a public figure in whatever arena, even if you are just up in front of a group of people that's very small, you're still teaching. We're all still teaching. And it's really important, in my estimation, for all of us that are in that position to be raw as much as we can, to be vulnerable as much as we can, because you never know. You just never know who's going to be impacted by your story, and something that you have to say right now, today, could have a very beneficial, even a life-changing impact for somebody on the other side of the world. So in that spirit, I want to continue with this theme of personal exposés today. And last week, we looked at a topic that I'll be touching on a little bit again, and that is forgiveness and release. So if you have not heard last week's show, and this is something that you would like to hear more about, I think it's something that we can all use. It's part of a spiritual growth. It's part of a personal growth and transformation lesson for all of us to get better at forgiving and releasing. So I'll touch a little bit more on those same subjects today, but that is last week's show. May the 5th is the date, and this is available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. So check that out. Now let's talk about today's topic. So today's topic involves abuse and psychological warfare. Okay? The title is Surviving Psychological Warfare. So as you might imagine, with a personal expose, I'm going to talk in large part about my own experience. And let me preface some of this here. If you are in a difficult or an abusive situation, I want to first acknowledge that I've been in those myself. I think that everyone has, especially when you define it broadly, but I do want you to know that there is help available for you. It is. It's available for you. So please, if you need it, reach out and ask for it. That's very, very important. So let me talk a little bit about what I mean by the title Surviving Psychological Warfare. I've talked about forgiveness. I've talked about selling myself short in the past few weeks. I've talked about making poor decisions based on somebody else's idea of who I should be, which in turn influenced me. And as human beings, we all have these influences, whether it's a boss or a friend or family member, could be one of our parents. And in my case, I've been talking about my own experiences and relationship with my mother, who is deceased. Actually, she passed away 4 years ago now. And I'm sharing all of this in hopes that if you are out there or someone that you know has a similar situation, that you will listen to this show and that you will take what applies to you and pass it on. By the way, please share this broadcast with people if you know somebody. You might be a catalyst for major, major change in their own life. It's highly possible. So when I talk about psychological warfare, those are words. Right? And words are just symbols of experiences and things. We use language to communicate with each other and then often with ourselves on that. I've never served in the military in any country, and I've never been in certain situations that maybe some of you have. Maybe some of your family members have been involved in a war, an actual war with guns, with mass murder, with genocide, things like that. I have not. However, the psychological and internal warfare is just as damaging to people, and it's not something that is always talked about because people don't want to admit that they've been in these situations. Well, here I am with a microphone broadcasting to the entire world, so not only will I admit that I've been in heavily abusive patterns of behavior, but that I've come out of it on the other side, a more loving, giving, free person. And you can do the same. So if you take nothing else from today's broadcast, please understand that component. So psychological warfare goes on oftentimes behind the scenes because people don't necessarily show that they seem to be carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. They don't, out of trying to process it themselves, possibly out of shame, possibly out of embarrassment, possibly out of a sense that we all have in modern societies that we need to be able to figure this out on our own. No, we don't. We do not need to be able to figure this out on our own. This is something that you can get help with and help for. And this type of warfare, wherever it exists, consumes us where we live. Yeah? Behind closed doors, wherever you go, you take it with you. And that's one of the reasons why people say start where you are in various spiritual practices is because you cannot escape where you are. What you are carrying with you today is what you're carrying with you. You cannot leave it behind. Right. I love to travel. Maybe you love to travel. Physical journeys can be wonderful experiences in a lot of ways, but you can't leave your baggage, mental and emotional, psychological baggage behind. It follows you. Therefore, you must start the path wherever you are. So, when someone's involved in an abusive relationship or an abusive pattern of behavior, the word abuse isn't always used. You might refer to it some other way if you have an abusive parent, as I did. If you are in a very, very difficult personal relationship, as I have been in the past, I am not now, happily, but maybe you are, and maybe you know friends and family members who are. So you could call it something else. You know, people that are in a volatile relationship often just refer to it that way. They say, "Oh yeah, I'm in a volatile relationship. I've been in one of those," and I would describe it to people as a volatile relationship. yeah, as a heated relationship where our tempers often got the best of us. And yeah, that was me as a younger adult. And yeah, as a young man, I was involved in some of those situations. And you can say, okay, well, we live in a pretty tense environment. We have a volatile relationship. But if you're out explaining that to people, understand that that is really nothing more than a defense mechanism. Let's just call it like we see it here. It's a defense mechanism to cover up pain and possibly shame, right? Possibly a sense of embarrassment for being in a situation where other people are not. And we just tend to think in these situations that it's life. Have you ever said that to yourself if you were in a difficult situation, if you were being used by a boss, for example, or mistreated in any way by a friend, family member, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, romantic partner, whatever? Have you ever said, okay, well, this is the way it is. Life is tough and we just, we grin and bear it. We get through it. And maybe you had a parent or a coach or a teacher that instilled that value in you. Well, it has a lot of value. However, it only goes so far when you're using that as a reason not to change, when you're using that as a justification for remaining where you are so that you don't transform your life, so that you don't make the decision to constantly grab the reins of your own life. That's what was going on with me. I went through years and years of psychological abuse that I'll tell you about on this broadcast from my own mother. And, if any of my family members are out there listening to this right now, because it's being broadcast worldwide, understand that this is my experience and I do not speak for any of you. In fact, one person's own private version of hell can be completely unrelatable to another person because they know the individual involved in a different capacity. Maybe they work with them. Maybe they're not as close, so maybe they don't see the crap that comes up all the time. So, if you're out there listening, I love you. Understand this is my experience, and I'm sharing because other people will benefit from this. So I don't apologize at all. So think of a situation in your own life where you have put up with abuse. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't have to mean physical abuse, okay? It doesn't have to mean being under constant threat of physical harm. It is most often emotional. In fact, where there's a physical threat, there are multiple emotional threats. There are all kinds of psychological games and manipulation, harshness going down. There's all kinds of stuff going on. So think of a situation. We all can. Maybe it's present, maybe it's past, right? Maybe it's distant past for you. But think about what made you take steps to get out of that situation. In other words, what was the tipping point for you at which you decided that you cannot take it anymore? What's the tipping point for you to say, okay, oh my God, enough. Okay, I can't do this anymore, whatever the conversation looked like. And if there was shouting involved, there was shouting involved. Now, there was a lot of shouting involved in my own life. When I finally put my foot down with my own mother, it was not in a shouting way at all, but as a young man, lacking the skills, lacking the years of meditation experience, lacking the wisdom and personal growth that I now have in middle age, I made a lot of mistakes and exacerbated the situation by lashing out myself. So think about a situation of your own and what was the tipping point? I just want to invite you to consider that for yourself. What was the tipping point at which point you decided, I can't take this anymore. I'm not going to take this anymore. This is not going to happen anymore. Now, if you're not there and you're thinking of a current situation, let me ask you a hard question. What's it going to take for you to hit that point and take action? And do you need help to get there? Because if you need help to get there, I want you to reach out and get that help to get there. Because all of the tools that I talk about, that OMTimes radio show hosts talk about, that personal growth experts talk about, write about, speak about, all of those tools are accessible to every single one of us. We live in the 21st century. I'm broadcasting on the internet right now. You have access to all of these tools, and you have access to people, real live human beings that can help you. So today on the broadcast, I want you to hold in mind, if you're thinking of a past situation that involved abuse and psychological warfare, what was the tipping point for you? And if you are currently in a situation like this, what will be the tipping point for you? So consider that. What we're going to look at today is what you do when you get there, and I'll tell you more about my own experience, and we'll talk about that in great depth on the other side of a commercial break, which we're going to take here in just a few minutes. So think about that. Think about what the tipping point was for you and what it's going to be. Because we'll walk through some things that you can do right now, to better your situation. We'll be back after this short break here. You're listening to Decide to Transform on OMTimes Radio.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Did you know that you have the power to change anything in your life? Did you know you can do so even with the things that you've already decided are impossible to change? Come join me, Venus Castleberg, on Outside the Impossible as I interview people from around the globe that have literally changed the things they thought were impossible to change just by using the amazing tools of Access Consciousness. Now airing Wednesdays, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Do you dare to believe that anything really is possible?
Are you considering starting your own podcast? Do you have a book or other content you'd like to share with a worldwide audience? Hello, I'm Tomas Garza, host of Decide to Transform here on OMTimes Radio. Myself and Lisa Berry, host of Light on Living, help people like you produce your very own radio show. At Podcast Prosperity, we help you create your show and recirculate your content for multimedia impact. Through creation and launch, we give you the support and mentorship you need and help you create the influence, income, and impact you desire. Contact us at lightonliving.com/podcast prosperity.
A social distancing tip.
Putting distance between yourself and others is critical to slowing the spread of coronavirus. So here are ways to stay in contact without the physical contact part. Call, send a text, set up a video conference, post on social media, dedicate a song on the radio. If you have symptoms of fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath, call your healthcare provider before going to their office. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #alone together. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Decide to Transform. I'm your host, Tomas Garza, and you're listening to OMTimes Radio. Let's launch right back into our heavy hitter subject of surviving psychological warfare. All right. It's not all happy and roses, but there are a lot of happy things that I'm going to talk about today. When we took a break, I invited you to think of a time in your life where if you broke free, if you've done this successfully in your life, think about what the tipping point was for you where you could no longer take abusive behavior. That could be, of course, from anyone. Could be from a friend or family member. Could be from a boss or a supervisor at work. It could be from a spouse or somebody that you're intimately involved with, right? Whatever that is, what was the tipping point for you? And if you haven't reached one, if you're currently embroiled in a situation like this, what's it going to take for you to reach that tipping point? And one of the things that I also want to share with you is what some of the benefits are for reaching that tipping point and taking action. What's on the other side of it? Because that can look impossible to see. I know this from personal experience. To live on the other side, on the freedom side of an abusive relationship, can require imagination that we don't feel like we have day to day, moment to moment. Now, that's one of the reasons why spiritual practice is a moment to moment type thing. And by doing certain practical things every day, every moment of every day, we can choose to better ourselves. We can choose peace instead of warfare. Right? Bombs don't have to be falling off and going off all around us. Yeah, you don't have to be literally under fire. If you're in an abusive situation, you are under fire. It doesn't have to involve bullets. Right? Words and deeds can be very wounding, as we all know. So there are rewards and benefits for coming out on the other side. So let me, in this segment, tell you a little bit more about my own personal experience. So the daily grind for me, and I'm talking about as a young man in high school in Albuquerque, New Mexico in the 1980s, my daily life had a lot of conflict and drama in it. And unfortunately, right, some of you can relate, my mom was a very, very hardcore alcoholic. And unfortunately, also, when she drank, she was not one of these happy people that you see at a party huddled in the corner laughing or making jokes and just having a good time. Now, she was mean, bitter, vindictive, and attacking, unprovoked or provoked. Now, unfortunately, as a young man, I fought back verbally an awful lot, and that didn't help matters super much. But I found at 16, 17 years of age, I couldn't really help myself. Maybe you can relate to that. Or maybe you have a teenager right now. You can remember when you were 16 or 17, even if you've never had kids. We don't have it all together at that age. We'd like to think that we do, but we don't, and that's just a fact. So a daily grind for me involved getting up, going to school, and returning home to a lot of uncertainty. Right? Apply this to your own situation, whatever it is. Returning home and not knowing whether you were going to get the loving version or the hateful, mean version. And if you're walking home or driving home, facing this, approaching this, what odds do you, if you're doing it right now, currently give yourself? Is it 50-50 that you're going to get the good side? Or is it more than 50-50 that you're going to get the bad side because of the time of day, because this person has been drinking, or because they have been doing whatever they do to make themselves more miserable than they already are. I, in my experience, had about 50-50 odds of encountering the loving, supportive mother that everyone likes to have, that did exist sometimes, I'll say, of course, and other times not at all. And the tirades were often unprovoked. Now, I just mentioned that some of them I couldn't help myself at the time. I couldn't help but get involved. I would, of course, handle that very differently now as an adult, but often they were unprovoked. And this ranged from picking on my appearance, right? I played football in high school and ate a lot. So when I was in playing shape, I was in better shape during the season when I was in training, and I sort of let myself go otherwise, and would put on weight, and that's not much fun to have pointed out to you, that you're ugly, or that you look like crap. Now, that's not very fun. Okay, I mean, it happens once. You could say, well, forget you. I'm not going to say these words on the radio. I probably could, but I'm not going to. I choose not to. Insert your own profanity. How about that? Okay, because I know it's applying in these situations. It did in mine as well. But, from my academics to my art projects, one afternoon I had a drawing project for an art class that I was working on. Well, I encountered my drunk mother who demanded to see it, and I refused to show it to her. So when I wasn't looking, I don't know what I did. I may have gone to the bathroom or something. She went into my room, found it, ripped it apart. It was due the next day. So I had to stay up until about 3:30 in the morning to finish it. And, I don't remember what grade or marks or remarks I got on that. But that wasn't the only time that things like that happened. And when she drank, she would just pick on anyone. She picked on my younger sister. She can speak for herself, for her own experience. In my experience, it was low-grade hell, because I never knew when she was going to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, get us out of bed with shrieking and just all kinds of horrible, blood-curdling screams, nasty language. This was my life. Can you relate to that? Yeah. Either as a kid or as an adult. Maybe you're in your 50s or 60s right now, and you're going through the same thing. I know you're out there. Some of you are out there. And if you're not listening now live, you'll be listening later, because this will be available 24/7 all over the world, wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the beauty of expressing this truth and this message, it will resonate with somebody. I'm confident of that. So the boozing just went on, the abuse went on, and it's really difficult to concentrate in that situation. If you're walking on eggshells, so to speak, if you're constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, it's really difficult to thrive. In fact, it's nearly impossible to thrive, and it takes an act of will, of profound will, just to survive. And yes, people can say, well, kids are resilient, adults are resilient. Yes, people are very resilient. All of us have a certain degree of resilience, but a lot of these situations are just very, very tough, because if you're constantly under threat of attack, it's really hard and possibly completely impossible to think about thriving, to think about fun, to think about happiness, all of those things that we all have the right to think about and to partake in. So along with the drinking came a period of time in the 1980s where there was a Valium addiction. On top of that, so throw that in there. All right, if you're familiar with that, that led to all kinds of really, really hectic, not just evenings, but also days and afternoons, Tuesday afternoons, added a whole different degree of uncertainty and, sleepwalking on the part of my mom, roaming around the house, shouting nonsense sometimes, but nevertheless, shouting is shouting, is it not? A disturbance is a disturbance, correct? These conditions were real difficult. So you may be wondering to yourself as I talk about this, well, how did I get out of that? Well, let's go through some of that here. Because the question is, well, all right, how do you get out of it? And what's the tipping point for me? Okay, well, as an adult, you can decide to switch jobs. You can decide to leave an abusive relationship. We get to choose these things. As a high schooler, it's not quite the same. I mean, yes, technically we could ask to go live somewhere else. That's possible. People have run away and things like that. But those weren't options that really presented themselves to me as attractive. So it's easy to feel stuck, isn't it? It's easy to feel stuck. It's easy to feel trapped. If you feel trapped thinking, okay, this is just the way it is. This is the way life is. And I'm just going to get through it. A survival mechanism, right? Rather than thriving. So, after all of the incidences accumulated over the years, I couldn't wait to get my driver's license. So honestly, that's one of the strategies that I put into place, was getting physical distance from the tirades. And they can still replay in your head, as you know, and that still happened to me. But it's helpful to have what I like to call sonic space, if that makes sense. Sonic space, psychic space as well. Space to be able to think, to be able to process without the constant threat of violence, of verbal violence, of psychological warfare, of nitpicking, of profanity-laced tirades, of demeaning conversations, of manipulation, little games, fear-mongering. Call it whatever it is. But getting that psychic space was really important for me, so I couldn't wait to get my driver's license. In the state of New Mexico in the U.S. at that time, a young person could get their full license at age 15, so I was on that. I was on it, and I took off and went for all kinds of drives to the desert, to the mountains, just even around town in an effort to get some psychological space. So this is something that you can do, even if it's heading into another room. If it's taking a walk for 10 or 15 minutes, that's good, right? How is that worse than, if that's all you can do, it's much better than staying in a room with somebody who's berating you, or where you feel like they're going to do it and you just know that it's going to happen at any point. So what is the impact on this? I mean, yes, you can take the physical space, and that's helpful. Let's talk for a second about the overall impact. So the overall impact on me was I didn't want to have anything to do with relationships. Now, of course, as a young man in my 20s, I went out and did all of the things that young men in their 20s do. Especially when working at a service bar restaurant on the night shift with lots of cocktails and lots of fun people that wanted to hang out and party. You can put all this together in your own mind. Yeah, maybe you were there too. I enjoyed it, by the way, in case you're wondering. But, the impact is I didn't want to have a relationship at all. I was really scared to death of committing myself into a long-term relationship, because my whole experience with relationships was struggle and trauma and strife. So that was something that was really going through my mind on a conscious level, not to mention the subconscious levels as a young man. And what happens in these situations, and you may have had this happen to you, is that we tend to replicate in our adulthood what our experience was in childhood or as a teenager. We tend to replicate that. And I once had a therapist that put it to me this way. She said, yeah, we gravitate toward what smells familiar. How about that? How about that for an image, right? We gravitate toward what smells familiar. If conflict smells familiar, guess what you're going to seek out as an adult? Subconsciously, even if you don't want to, it's going to find you unless you've done the personal work on yourself. If that sounds harsh, all right, so be it. Let it sound harsh. It's the truth. Unless we do the personal work on ourselves, then we're going to repeat the same patterns over and over and over again. We're going to go with what feels familiar because we have not programmed ourselves differently. And that's what personal growth is gaining information. If you need information, it's gaining resilience and strength and techniques and encouragement, if that's what you need, to be able to make changes in your own life, because none of us deserves to be walking on eggshells. That's a fact. None of us deserves to be wondering when the other shoe is going to drop. We don't deserve to be abused. We don't deserve to be hit. We don't deserve to be yelled at or to have our own happiness pulled down because somebody is unhappy on their own. Because what happens with psychological warfare is that a person lashing out at you is also lashing out at themselves. They're unhappy and at war with themselves. You can only imagine, right? Maybe you've been there yourself. So on the other side of the break here, I want to talk a little bit about some of the benefits of doing some of the things that I did that I'll tell you about breaking free from these situations. We'll be right back after this commercial break. You're listening to Decide to Transform on OMTimes Radio.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me the Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
Hi, I'm Tomas Garza, author of Decide and host of Decide to Transform on OMTimes Radio. I want to ask you, if you want something in life, have you decided on it? If not, you'll listen to a limiting story about yourself. You will say you can't, you're too old, too young, etc. Decide to transform in life. Learn what you can choose to believe instead of your limiting stories. Decide. Available now in paperback and ebook.
I'm Fidel Nsombo. I was born in a city called the Bukavu in the Congo. We were a loving family, and then, boom, Everything that I had disappeared in a single day. People think that when you are a refugee and they resettle you to America and all your problems are done, they don't understand that that's the beginning of everything. I was not born a refugee. I was made one.
It's time we welcome refugee families with open arms. Learn more at embracerefugees.org, brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Decide to Transform. I'm your host, Tomas Garza, and you are listening to Surviving Psychological Warfare. Yes, that's what we've been talking about today. And during this last segment of the broadcast, I want to make sure that we talk about some of the benefits of standing up for yourself. This is not something that comes very easily to a lot of people. All right, and maybe you're out there thinking, God, I really wish I could do that myself. Well, you can, but let's all acknowledge that it's not the first thing some of us think of, and it's certainly not the easiest thing. Everything that a spiritual teacher talks about is simple. Actually, it's all simple. It's conceptually simple. Moment to moment, we make a decision in favor of peace. Moment to moment, we make a decision in favor of love, in favor of what's happy and joyful, rather than a decision in favor of fear. Okay, it's simple just like that. Now, does that make it easy? No, not at all. And in fact, it can be really hard. Before the break, in the situation with my own mom, I was talking about what a benefit it was for me to get my driver's license and get physical distance. Now, I went on as a young adult and moved to a different state and lived apart from her for most of the time that she was alive. So there was physical distance there. But what about the emotional distance? Yeah. What about that when somebody can write you a nasty email or a text? Or what about when someone can pick up the phone and deliver the same tirade, the same guilt trips, the same poor me-isms that they used to deliver on a daily basis in person when you were younger? What about if they can do all that still because they can? And we don't get to choose our family members, our blood family members. Of course, we can consciously choose a family in a broader sense and in broader terms, happily, luckily, thank God. We can sure do that, and that's a good thing. But it's that emotional space that's difficult to come by when you still have access to somebody and they still have access to you. So in my own situation, without going into too many of the details here in the time that is remaining to us, I still got dragged in to the drama. And, I went on to get married myself. I have 2 children, and that was, there still are my mom's. They were, when she was alive, her only grandkids, just my 2 kids, my son and daughter. So there was that relationship, and she would come and visit us. We would go visit her, and she always found a way, outside of the presence of the kids, happily, to turn on me, always. And I knew that it still hurt me as an adult, as a man in my early 40s. I'm now 48. But we had some really, really rough times from about, I would say 2005 to 2015. About a decade there. Every time we spoke to each other or saw each other, there was more of the same drama. And one of the things that I've been doing to get my own psychological space was engaging heavily engaging in spiritual practice for a number of years. I attended a Tibetan Buddhist center in Portland, Oregon. I moved from New Mexico to Oregon when I was in my 20s, and had a lot of really wonderful teachers, retreats, experiences with meditation. And that's a practice that I've always been fortunate enough to be able to rely on. I started meditating back in high school, in fact, in the 1980s. And that is something that I've always connected with, always resonated with, and it's always been a help to me. So as time went on and I more purposefully applied myself to spirituality, I applied myself to retreats, to meditation practice, to really working old school style. Really, there's no easy fix for this. Old school style, sitting on a cushion and seeing my own crap come up. That kind of practice, and not easy, right? Simple? Yes. Easy? No, not at all. Because you have to release all of that. We all have to, and it takes a lot of time. It takes decades, years sometimes. But as time wore on, I did more and more of that work. I discovered A Course in Miracles, and that has played a major, major spiritual role in my own life. And by about 2015, I was ready to just put my foot down and say, okay, I'm not going to be treated like this anymore. If you want to have a relationship with my kids, then that is something that you're going to have to do on your own. I'm not going to facilitate it because I'm not going to put myself in harm's way any longer. I will not be treated like this. That is all. Okay. That's a short form version of a conversation we had back in about the end of 2014 there. And we didn't speak much the last year and a half of my mom's life as a result of that. And here are the benefits to me of that. Oh, yes, major benefits. So if you've had a situation like this, you can relate to some of these. If you are searching to have this type of situation come to an end and to have a breakthrough moment, these are some of the benefits that can await you on the other side. And how about some psychological strength for one? I immediately felt stronger when I stood up to my mother and allowed myself to stand strong and tall as an adult. It really felt like a weight being lifted off my shoulders. I mean, I literally felt lighter, felt more confident, felt more powerful, authoritative, you name the positive word. I felt all of that. That's something you can feel too. And there's also a tremendous sense of autonomy. As in, okay, I'm not dependent on this person for my psychological and emotional well-being. Who am I dependent on? Me. And of course, there are other people to help with this, but ultimately, we're dependent on ourselves. So to assert that power, to assert that autonomy and independence, emotional independence. Now, I had long since moved away. I mean, this is, I'd been living in another state for decades, 2 decades. So it's not that, it's the emotional independence. It's the emotional cutting of the cord, so to speak, frees you up. And that's one of the benefits to you of coming out on the other side of a situation like this is freedom, personal freedom. And when, I have to say, when you insist on yourself and insist on healthy boundaries, because you really are engaged in a conversation of healthy boundaries here. That's what this is all about. And I want you to know that it's okay to set healthy boundaries for yourself. You don't want to give and give and give and give and give to an energy vampire or to an abusive human being. It's okay to insist on yourself. Now, when you do, you experience the sense of freedom, of psychological freedom, of personal independence and autonomy that I know some of you are yearning for. I can feel it. I know. I've been there. All of us have been there. So when you invest in your own value, you become a number of different things. You become actually more giving. It may sound like a paradox to you, but to insist on healthy boundaries for yourself means to become more giving. Why you set limits on the amount of energy you're going to expend on other people, and you have better, more joyful, more happy, loving energy to give when you give it. It's qualitatively different. If you've done this, you know. And if you haven't done it, look forward to it, because it's going to happen for you if you make the choice to. You become more loving. You become more giving. You become more vibrant, more alive. Your friends will start to notice that you look better. Yeah, that your complexion changes. Where you once looked sad, you look happy. They may actually start to ask you, hey, what have you done, if they don't know? Right? And maybe they do know, because maybe this situation for you involves leaving a difficult relationship or a difficult work arrangement, whatever that is. People will begin to notice. And what's most important is not what they say or what they notice, it's what you notice in yourself. So how will your energy level change? Yeah, if you've done this in the past, how did it change? Yeah, think back on that and how much better you felt, because this is something that each and every one of us deserves. All right. We each deserve to set healthy boundaries and expectations for ourselves that we're not going to put up with certain behavior. And what can happen? Well, if you encounter that behavior as an adult further down the line, if you have gone through the difficult, sometimes really difficult steps of creating this personal space and autonomy for yourself, you'll be able to recognize when you see another pattern, similar pattern of behavior coming, and you'll be able to nip it in the bud, to stop it immediately, and ideally not to get sucked into another negative situation. So what's the key to that? It's your own work on yourself. There is a reason why there are so many people talking about spirituality. There is a reason, there are many reasons, why there are so many different people talking about personal growth and transformation, because you never know who you're going to reach. And here's another thing. There are people out there that will resonate best with you. In fact, you could even go so far as to say that there are people out there that will resonate only with you. So, if you think about it that way, you're their teacher. They're looking for you as soon as you answer the call. So answer it today. I want to invite you to do that, whatever that looks like. Now, with questions for me, feel welcome to send me an email. That's Tomas, T-O-M-A-S, at tomasgarza.com. And again, there's no H in Tomas. It's T-O-M-A-S. At tomasgarza.com. I'm happy to answer your emails, and thank you so much to all who have written in with questions for the show, which I always welcome, or just with your own comments. I'm so happy that you reached out to me, so thank you very much for doing that. So, next week on the show, I want to talk about this here in the time that remains, because we're switching gears. I've spent 4 weeks talking about deep personal exposés, so now we're going to take a little break from that, and we're going to have a couple of interviews starting next week. The show date is Tuesday the 19th. Tuesday the 19th of May. So on the 19th and on the 26th, I'm going to welcome on to Decide to Transform a couple of very sharp, very passionate, and very inspiring guests. Starting with next week, let me preview this for you because I really want to invite you to tune in. If you can tune in live, it's 10 o'clock a.m. Pacific time, Tuesday next week, 1 p.m. Eastern, and catch the replay on OMTimes Radio. You can check the station listing for the broadcast times, or of course catch it on Apple, Spotify, Spreaker, Podbean, wherever you listen to podcasts. Because my guest next week is Robert B. McGinnis. Robert is the founder and CEO of Soul Venture LLC, and this is a gentleman who specializes in helping people go from soul-sucking career to calling, and I mean on a spiritual level. So join us next week as Robert takes us through his own personal experience of walking the walk. He's a really sharp, high energy guy, and I know that you're going to love as I talk with him about going from career to calling. All right, the title of the show, in fact, is From Career to Calling, What Does It Take to Make the Leap? He's going to talk about what it took him to take the leap from a soul-sucking, life-draining career, can you relate, to a calling that serves people and serves him and his higher purpose. Specifically, he'll be talking about his own story, and he'll be talking about some of the work, the spiritual work, the deep internal personal work that I keep talking about here on the show. We'll hear from Robert about what has worked with him and for him and how difficult it was. He has featured on most of the major news networks, NBC, Fox, and he has had some dynamite first-rate instruction from some first-rate, really, really highly qualified spiritual instructors. So please tune in next week as I welcome Robert B. McGinnis here on Decide to Transform. So got a couple interviews coming up. I really hope that you have found something of value today. And if you know of somebody that would benefit from this, please, I invite you to pass this link on to them. I want everybody to have a great week. We'll see you back here when I welcome Robert B. McGinnis next Tuesday on Decide to Transform. Have a great week, everybody.